That's right. We're so glad to have you listening today to the podcast for Christians United for God and Country and the United States Prayer Force. I am Steve D, and along with Pastor Vince, we're here to talk about America, and we're here to encourage you to pray for this great country. A lot of people like to disparage America these days. They like to say bad things about it. It's not that America has been perfect throughout its history. There have been flaws. There have been terrible times. There have been wars. There has been discrimination. There's been lots of things. But no country has done more and been more successful and more good for humanity than America has. When you think of what America has done for the world in regards to, gee whiz, when you think about the amount of money that we send countries, Pastor, things like that, and the amount of the number of missionaries that have come from the United States and gone around the world to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. America has been a great country with flaws, and it's still a great country. What we're praying for now is that America will go off into the future and continue to be a great country. We have a set of prayer points that we'd love to send you. If you will send us an email requesting it, christiansunited50@gmail.com. That's christiansunited50@gmail.com. 7 prayer points that we touch upon every time we get together to pray, and we'd love for you to join us in doing that. We got a lot of things to talk about today. Pastor has some special points to bring out, and I got a couple of quick things I want to touch on before we get to that. And first of all, if you look at what's going on in our government right now, we have a big election coming up in November. Everybody knows that. But if you look at something that's really different about this upcoming election and this campaign season, look at what the candidates are saying about each other and what their campaign workers are also saying about their opponents in this upcoming election. It is caustic. It is filled with personal attacks. It's not really a strong debate over policies. It's verbal warfare in an attempt to disparage their opponents. And it's really happening on both sides. You know, Donald Trump is technically, he's very good at it, to tell you the truth. I mean, he made up names for everybody from Sleepy Joe to Crooked Hillary. He even had one for Ted Cruz, who's now a good friend and an ally. So, you know, that's a funny thing about Donald Trump. He fights hard in an election, but I don't think that he really hates the people he's disparaging. He really doesn't. Kamala Harris and a lot of the folks on the left call Donald Trump Adolf Hitler. He is the incarnation of Adolf Hitler. He is the biggest threat to democracy. We got a lot of things to talk about in that regard. And Pastor's going to touch on some of those things. Wanted to hit on a couple of fact checks real quick. There was something that occurred not too long ago. You may remember seeing it on the news. While he was in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, for a wreath-laying ceremony with Vice President Kamala Harris at the Flight 93 National Memorial, President Joe Biden visited a local fire station where he spoke with first responders and area residents. In a now viral video, Biden is shown talking to a man wearing a hat supporting Donald Trump for president. Biden, who dropped his bid for re-election on July 21st and endorsed Harris, offered the man a hat with the presidential seal on it in exchange for the Trump hat. Then, with encouragement from the crowd, Biden put on the Trump hat for a moment and smiled. White House spokesman Andrew Bates later described the move as a simple gesture of unity. But some social media posts have used these clips or screenshots of the video to suggest that Biden had switched his support to the Republican candidate for president. Even when you think of that, Pastor, it is such an absurd claim that anybody would buy into that through a social media post. It is quite funny. Biden continues to support Harris's campaign for president, with plans to make appearances on her behalf in several key states. We'll see how that goes. Any suggestion that his brief donning of a Trump hat means that he switched his allegiance is false. That wasn't a hard one to figure out.
Some people were saying he was displaying his hatred for Kamala Harris. In regard to what had happened to him and him having to drop out of the presidential election.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to point out here. Everybody is eliciting these expressions of hatred and disparagement. It's not a normal election. I mean, in the old days, you go back to maybe 1963 with John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Those guys sat on a studio together and they discussed issues. They didn't call each other names. They didn't make up funny names for each other. And all the elections that have taken place, from Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and all those, the Bushes and stuff like that, it never got this ugly. It never did. Here's another quick fact check for you. At the debate with President Trump, did Kamala Harris wear earrings that contained earphones? Viral posts on social media claimed that Harris cheated by wearing such earrings and suggested that her remarks and responses were fed to her during the debate. Well, there's a website known as What Kamala Wore, which covers Harris's fashion and style choices. It said on September 11th that the vice president wore her South Sea pearl earrings from the Tiffany hardware collection at the debate. The article shows photos of the earrings that Harris wore at the debate, which have an open setting below the pearls, as opposed to the design of the Nova H1 audio earrings that are shown on the website of the company that makes that product. Even if you watched the debate, it's probably extremely difficult to engage in a debate, to listen to what your opponent is saying, and then to listen in your ears to what some advisor is telling you to say. It doesn't make sense, and I don't believe she wore those earrings. Apparently, the photographs that they have show her the earrings she wore do not look like the audio earrings that company makes. So that's another kind of fact check debunk situation there. And that's what I have to give you today for quick fact checks. Pastor, what do you got for us today?
Well, continuing on in that, in regard to, this name calling, we spoke about it last time we were together.
Yes.
In regard to the propaganda and the false narratives that are being put out there, especially by, the Harris campaign. But just the other day, on Monday, September the 16th, one day after the failed assassination attempt regarding President Trump on the golf course there in West Palm Beach, Florida, Hillary Clinton was on that show, and she made this statement. This is just an excerpt. All right. It's not the complete statement, right, that she made. But she says, I don't understand why it is so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is, his danger to our country and to the world. Now, you see, when you start having these assassination attempts by, undoubtedly, all right, these are crazed people, all right, mentally imbalanced people.
Demon possessed.
Or demon possessed too, both.
Yeah.
All right. But when you make statements about a man, okay, who is a danger not only to our own country, but a danger to the entire world, all right, you can see how some of these people would grab a hold of such a thing and then attempt, all right, to kill and assassinate, the former president. And so and then she went on and said this: Donald Trump has disqualified himself over and over and over again to be a presidential candidate, let alone president.
But he was president.
I know.
Did she not remember that? She lost.
He was pretty much the individual who started the, Abrahamic Accords, which ultimately brought peace to the nation, some of the Middle Eastern countries.
Yeah.
And he also, through his sanctions regarding Iran, all right, pretty much decimated them in regard to their ability to make money through oil and send it to, terrorist groups, so forth and so on. So I don't see how he's such a danger to the entire world and a danger to our country.
It's just that kind of rhetoric we were talking about. It's this caustic rhetoric, this talk that it's unlike any other election that, and certainly in my memory. Yeah.
And it's not just Hillary, and it's not just, Kamala. You have Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney, and they're all saying that Trump is such a danger. And so my question is, what is it about Donald Trump, all right, in regard to these politicians like Hillary, like Dick Cheney, like Liz Cheney and others, that they're so terrified in regard to Donald Trump becoming president? All right. And, they want to always continue on this false narrative of how dangerous he is. Could it possibly be? I'm just making, putting a question out there. I don't have the answer. Could it possibly be, though, that if he is elected, the crimes, all right, that these individuals have committed and the monies possibly that they've received
The
from
bribes,
certain,
right. Mhm.
and things of that nature,
Yes.
all right, would all ultimately be investigated by a Department of Justice over which Donald Trump was the head.
Sure.
All right. I know this about these people. They're corrupt and they're evil. And we're going to say something about that here in just a moment.
Mhm.
All right. But going on to another thought here. Today is Tuesday, September the 17th, and I guess it's 37 years ago, on September 17th, 1787, our Constitution of the United States was signed, all right, by 39 delegates to the Constitutional Convention from 12 states. There was one state that didn't send any delegates. That was the state of Rhode Island.
Mhm.
But 39 men from 12 states, all right, meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in Independence Hall, all right, endorsed the document. All right. And then later on, the document had to be voted upon. And so in the year 1788, the states had ratified it, and it ultimately became the law of the land. Now, every one of the signers that had taken part in every one of those 39 men who had signed the Constitution had taken part in the American Revolution. 30 of those signers, of those 39, were in active military duty. 7 of the signers had signed the Declaration of Independence, and the youngest man to sign the Constitution was a man by the name of Jonathan Dayton. He was 26 years of age.
Mhm.
And the oldest man to sign the Constitution was the said and well-known Benjamin Franklin, who at that time was 81 years of age.
Really? Okay. I
Now,
know that.
of the 39 signers, all but 4 were professing Christians.
No kidding.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
And James Madison, who was a part of the Constitutional Convention and a signer, all right, is sometimes referred to as being the framer of the Constitution. And James Madison was educated at the College of New Jersey, which ultimately became Princeton University. And at that time in history, the College of New Jersey was a preacher training institution.
So it was other schools, Harvard.
Yes, Harvard.
Originally. Yeah.
Mhm. And during the years that he was at the College of New Jersey, we say to pray for revival, but a revival, all right, broke out at the college. A great revival took place at the College of New Jersey, and Madison was enrolled there, and he took a part in that revival. And he ultimately graduated, returned to the state of Virginia, and he conducted services, all right, in his father's home. And he desired ultimately to become part of the Virginia legislature. And his opponent said this about James Madison: he was better suited to the pulpit than to a legislative hall. Okay, but that's the kind of man he was, and that's the kind of Christian he was.
Mhm.
Now, the founders of the Constitution understood this. All right, they understood the sinfulness of man.
Right.
Jeremiah chapter 17, verse number 9 says, "The heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked." They believe that, they understood that, and that is the purpose, you see.
Mhm.
They were guided by God. They were guided in their belief in God and belief in the scriptures. And because they understood the sinfulness of man, that ultimately led them, when they put together the Constitution, to put in it 3 branches of government: executive, legislature, and legislative,
Mhm.
and the judicial branch, because they understood that if all power was put into one individual or one branch of government, because they understood the sinfulness of man, that it would ultimately lead to tyranny.
Mhm.
And that, tyranny is absolute power, absolute control.
Right.
And so when they were framing the Constitution, they were basing it on scripture and scriptural principles. Now, let me give you a statement that James Madison made in 1787. He said, all men having power ought to be distrusted to a certain degree." Okay? He understood that.
Mhm.
You can't just give someone absolute control and absolute power because of the sinful nature of a man's heart. he's likely to be
Abuse
taken
it.
over, abuse
Yep,
it. Yes. And then here's another man who was a signer of the Constitution, a constitutional delegate. His name was Gouverneur Morris. Now, he wasn't a governor.
That's his name?
That is his name.
Okay.
Okay, that was his mother's maiden name.
I think
Gouverneur.
his parents wanted him to be something particular, it sounds like.
Well, he never was. I don't think he ever was a governor.
Okay.
Okay. He was a
Right.
senator.
Okay.
He had some other positions in government, but I don't know if he ever was a governor. But his name was Gouverneur Morris.
Okay.
He's a constitutional delegate. And here's something that he said. He said, religion is the only basis of good morals.
Yes.
Therefore, education should teach the precepts of religion and the duties of man toward God.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These guys understood men, and they believed in God, and they believed in the Bible, and they allowed that belief to frame the things that they said and the things that they were ultimately bringing into the law.
Sure.
Okay. Now, he makes that statement, anyways, I don't know exactly what year he made it in, if he made it in 1787 or before, but he said, again, only by religion can you have good morals. All right. And education should teach the precepts of religion and the duties. All right. Teach the precepts of religion and the duties of man toward God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you understand this. In 1962, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled it was unconstitutional for states to require Bible reading and prayer in the public schools.
I remember that.
And that's when God got expelled and the Bible got expelled.
Right.
All right. From the public school system. All right. So now 62 years later, okay, you can see what's going on in the public
Sure
schools.
can.
Not only do they not educate our children in many places.
Right.
All right. These kids are graduating from high school and they can't even read at a high school reading level. All right. But when you go to school, there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's immorality. And now, you read about something like going along these lines every day, killing,
Sure.
shootings.
Yes.
Okay. No God, no Bible, and basically no morals.
Right. But most people will look back at that and say they won't see the connection. They won't see the connection between casting God out of the educational system and then seeing what's happening in our schools today. They won't see it. Only maybe the Christian will. And based on the information you just gave us, hopefully more people will understand that that's what happened back in 1962. I was in second grade.
Yeah.
When that happened. Yeah. Because I remember in first grade, we would pray as a class in the morning. We would say the Pledge of Allegiance. We would also go out in the hallway and bury our heads under our jackets, afraid of a nuclear attack. If you remember that, I don't know if you remember that.
And also in regard to those laws that they had.
Yeah.
All right. It wasn't an absolute law. All right. These are state laws.
Yes.
Not federal laws.
Right.
All right. In regard to what the states, I believe when the Supreme Court made that decision, they took two states in particular. I think they might have taken Maryland and Pennsylvania. All right. But in those states, you could be exempt. Okay. If you did not want your child to be present for the Bible reading and the prayer,
Sure.
you could just write a letter and say, listen, I don't want my child taking part in that.
That's fine.
Okay. So it wasn't like they were trying to cram it down everybody's throat.
Right.
Okay.
You mean like they are today with drag queen story hour?
Yeah.
That's
Transgenderism and all that kind of
getting
stuff.
crammed down the throat pretty
Yeah.
bad too, it seems
Right.
like.
And, naturally, and everybody's aware of it, that in particular states like California, maybe some other places, where a child can be given drugs, pre-puberty blockers and so
That's
forth
right.
and so on,
Sure.
and without parental consent.
That's hardly believable that anybody would try to put forth such an idea and that anybody would support it. Yeah. It's unreal.
Now, we live in a day and time when everybody's tatted, tattooed.
Tattoos.
Okay.
Yeah. Scared
But,
me for a minute. Okay.
There was a time in Connecticut where we live, tattoo parlors were against the law.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, they were against the law.
Okay.
Okay. You couldn't go and get it. If you wanted, you had to go someplace where they did it.
Sure.
Or maybe, naturally there are always people that dabbled in doing it themselves.
Mhm.
However, all right, let's say I have a 10-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid, and I want to bring them down to the tattoo parlor and say, you know what, give my child a tat, whatever it is they want.
I want a big skull right here on my shoulder.
Now, I would assume, I can't say this, for certain,
Right.
but I would assume that, even the people who run the tattoo parlor and give the tattoos would say you can't do it.
At least until they're 18 years old. I imagine there's something like that. Right? Yeah.
All right. So you can't give a kid a tattoo.
Right.
Okay. But they can go and tell their teacher they want to become the opposite sex that they were born.
And they can have their private parts removed or fabricated out of it's
insanity.
Insanity. I know.
All right.
It is.
Okay. There was a preacher who's been in heaven now for a number of years. His name was Lester Roloff.
Mhm.
He was a great man of faith, and he had a men's home and a women's home and a children's home in the state of Texas and a church. And he ultimately, the state of Texas tried to close him down, and he fought the state of Texas and he won. But he used to say, America is an insane asylum run by the inmates.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's exactly what we have going on today in
Yeah,
America.
it's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
That's right.
Here's another man that was a part of the Constitutional Convention that everybody, you might not have been, had known the name of Gouverneur Morris, but everybody knows who this guy is,
Sure.
Alexander Hamilton.
Broadway play.
All right. Alexander Hamilton, another sign of the Constitution. All right. He sought to begin an association which would be named the Christian Constitutional Society. Right? He wanted to start this association, the Christian Constitutional Society, and it had two objectives. Number one was to support. Here's the first objective: to support the Christian religion.
Talk about your separation of church and state, right?
Okay.
That comes later.
It wasn't a governmental thing. It was just something he was doing, privately. We're going to start this, organization outside of the government.
Having constitutional in there kind of scares people, I think.
Well, but here's the thing. Okay. Number one, they were going to start this organization to support the Christian religion. That's first, number one on the list.
Okay.
The second objective was to support the support of the United States.
That makes good sense.
Okay. So you teach people to be Christian. All right. And you teach people to support the government.
Right.
Okay. And say, now, this is why, we say it again and again and again. All right. America was a blessed nation.
Sure.
And to some degree still is a blessed nation.
Sure.
But the reason why we were a blessed nation and we continue to be a blessed nation is because our government, our country, and it's the only one in the world.
That's true.
Okay. You see, there have been other nations which have been blessed of God. All right. But they weren't begun by godly men who wanted a godly government. They might have ultimately became that.
Sure.
Take, for instance, you have Germany. All right. Martin Luther. That's where the Reformation started.
That's right.
Okay. It was a nation that was wonderfully blessed of God, but they have turned away from God. Okay. And then ultimately, when you turn away from God, you have all kinds of wickedness. All right. Then ultimately, in the 20th century, Adolf Hitler comes on the scene. All right. And now, Germany is a country which is just as liberal as you could possibly get. Right. And when the Antichrist comes on the scene, they are going to follow him hook, line, and sinker. England was a nation that was wonderfully blessed of God. You had revivals throughout the entire British Empire. You had them in England, the country of Wales, which is part of the, British Empire. America had 2 national revivals. Wales had 5 national revivals.
Right.
All right. Scotland, another, part of the British Empire. They had revivals. We have our English King James Bible, which came to us, all right, from England, all right? A nation that was John Wesley, Charles Wesley, George Whitefield, who, was so monumental in preaching during the first Great Awakening that took place in the United States. These men came here, or Wesley didn't, but these men like Whitefield came here from England and were mightily used of God in blessing our nation and bringing Christ and the Bible and revival to our nation. All right. So, but look at England now. Look at England now. sometimes you see them doing some things that ultimately make sense, I think, in regard to puberty blockers and things of that nature. All right. In recent
For
months,
kids.
for kids, they
Yep.
said you can't do that.
Right.
All right. But then on the other hand, you got Christians getting arrested in England for preaching the Bible outside and so forth and so on.
That's right.
So, you got some crazy things going on in England. But I'm talking about from what it was,
Mhm.
okay, and what it is today.
Right.
Okay. And you see that happening in America now. Okay. What America was, its beginnings, how it was wonderfully blessed of God, how, God moved throughout our country in regard to not just a national awakening, but revivals throughout certain parts of our country, people believing in God, believing in the Bible. And now look at what's going on. You have candidates that are, trying to get into public office. They believe in all kinds of wickedness and ungodliness. And, all right, if you don't follow that, you are against democracy. If you don't believe in abortion at any time in a woman's pregnancy, you're against democracy.
Right.
Okay? That's a false narrative.
Yes.
You see.
There's quite a few of those floating around these days. Yes.
Yes. All right. And as we kind of already mentioned, you see what's going on in the school system where there's no God. And, that will befall a nation. When a nation turns against God, like Germany, when a nation turns against God, like England, okay, then ultimately the judgment of God falls, because there's nothing new under the sun, Solomon said. And the things that are going on in our country and in these other countries, you look at the history of the nation of Israel, and the same thing befell them. When they followed God, God blessed.
Right.
All right. They defeated their enemies when their enemies warred against them. All right. They were blessed of God, and God provided them with all kinds of, Israel was an earthly people. God provided them with all kinds of earthly blessings. All right. But they were blessed of the Lord mightily. And when they turned away from God,
all hell broke loose. Yeah.
the judgment of God ultimately
Right.
fell upon them. When they, listen, I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. All right. When Christ goes to the cross, okay, it just wasn't Israel that wanted him to die on the cross.
Mhm.
It was the Romans that put him to death. And when he went there, it was me. Okay. Because when he went to the cross, it was my sin that was placed upon him, who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree. So it wasn't, like some people would try to blame the Jew. All right. It wasn't the Jew. It was the world. All right. And when he goes to the cross, he dies for the sins of the world. All right. But, when a nation turns against God, they reap the judgment of God.
Right.
In 70 AD, okay, the Roman Empire invaded. They ruled the world, but they invaded, especially Titus, Roman general, invaded Jerusalem. All right. And he destroyed the city of Jerusalem. All right. They were slaughtered by the thousands. All right. And they were crucified upon trees. And not only did Titus destroy the city of Jerusalem, he destroyed the Jewish temple. And they have not had a temple to worship in from 70 AD until this present time.
Well, if you look at the deterioration of our country, you talked about 1962 when there was laws were passed that you couldn't compel anybody to pray in school and things like that. Well, you really should never compel anybody to pray that doesn't want to pray anyway. So I kind of agree with that. But they made it almost like it was against the law to bring religious
right. And as we said,
elements into
as we mentioned, if you didn't want your child to pray before then, they didn't have to.
Right.
If you didn't want to have him hear the Bible, they didn't have to.
Sure. Right.
And then you can see the deterioration, though. First, you kick God out of school, and then in the early 70s, that's when abortion becomes legalized.
Well, don't forget the 1960s either. That was when things really started to get extremely
Oh yeah.
free spirited, shall
Yeah,
we
yeah,
say?
yeah.
From the days of Woodstock, and
Right.
drugs became more available and prevalent in our country.
Hmm.
Morality took a steep dive into all kinds of trouble. If you remember in the '60s, we both lived through the '60s. I was pretty young. You were pretty young too, but I think we can remember some of it. And also, I'm thinking now of this upcoming election. If you look at the way the election is being conducted, it is a verbal war of candidates just fighting each other, calling the names and accusing one another. Like even Trump accuses Kamala Harris of being a communist, a socialist. I honestly don't believe that she is that or wants to be that. Maybe some of her policies lean towards a socialist type of government, but I don't believe she wants to convert America from a democracy republic into
that. I can't
that.
say that I completely agree with,
Mhm.
because when she was a senator from California,
Yeah.
she was the most liberal
Yes.
senator, all
Mhm.
right, in the U.S. Senate. She was more liberal, all right, than Bernie Sanders.
Sure.
And Bernie Sanders is an avowed socialist.
Sure. At least he claims to be. But do you think even Bernie Sanders wants to destroy the democracy of America and convert this into a socialist country? Do you think that that's in his heart to do so?
Okay.
I mean,
they want to change America. That's
They do.
undoubtedly. They
Yeah.
want to change America from what it is, and they want to fashion it, all right, as the European model.
yes.
Okay. Where in regard to economics specifically, we are socialists.
Right.
Okay. Now, I know they have elections in Germany and they have elections in many of those.
In Russia.
All right. But in actuality, they are socialist communists.
Right.
So, I don't think they want to have a tyrannical, type of government, but they don't want one nation under God.
No, under God, for sure. They don't want that. I know I think the way America has been structured through its constitution back in the very earliest days, it would be very difficult to convert our democracy, this republic, into another form of government. It would require.
You'd have to change the Constitution.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's not going to be easy to do. And I don't think a lot of folks want to do that. I know that a lot of people want stricter gun control. They want to change the Second Amendment. They want, they don't want free speech to be absolute by any means. They want censorship and various things like that. But
well, I wasn't planning on this, but years ago, there was a man who's written several books, okay, in regard to kind of what we're talking about right now. And this is how far back this is going. I remember seeing him not even on a video. It was on a, what do you call it? Can't even remember what the name they called him. Showing slides on a screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And but it had audio. And here's what he said. He said one day, he said that, and this was his prediction. He said the United States government is going to release, all right, all the facts regarding the Kennedy assassination.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. And Donald Trump has said that if he got to be president, he would do it.
You bet.
Okay. And this man said, when the people of the United States will find out the fact that the CIA had a part in the Kennedy assassination, they will want to change our government.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I wish I knew what they want to change it into, because I just don't.
Well, they want to fashion it, like the European government, where, you don't have elections every 4 years. Okay. Anytime you need to, you can call for a special election, remove the person that's in power. You see, and you could see where people would maybe be going along with that. If they felt the person that was a president was, not doing what was right.
If you look at how uneducated the newer, or I should say the younger generations have become, they know nothing about U.S. history. They know very little about world history. Talk about reading and mathematics. You say they're not reading at what used to be traditional high school levels and things like that. So they can't be very knowledgeable about civics.
No.
And the U.S. Constitution, because they don't study it.
That would be a fun thing to do. All right. Almost do it like, I think Fox does it with Jesse Waters. She get on the street and just go up to a certain person, young person, old
we can
person,
do it,
and say, hey, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. What are the three branches of government?
We're going to do that. We're going to put it right here on this podcast.
I don't know, oak tree, maple tree. And
What, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Yeah.
Who said that? Yeah, I wonder. Okay. We're so glad to have you listening today. We have a website. We'd love you to go there and join the United States Prayer Force. Very easy to do. Go to ChristiansUnited50.com, ChristiansUnited50.com. You can also, on that website, you can go to the donate page and you can donate something to help keep the podcast on the air. We are not here advocating for Christian nationalism. You can accuse us of anything you want, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here advocating for Christians to unite in prayer, to save America, to keep America on a right course, to bring America closer to God. We're not trying to do anything to discriminate against any group of people whatsoever. So don't try and even accuse us of doing that. And, it's just a real pleasure to be able to talk freely in this country about the things we believe and the positions we take politically and religiously. You can do the same. So do so. Send us an email at ChristiansUnited50@gmail.com. And we'd love to talk about your comments or answer your questions if you send them to us. We really appreciate it. Pastor, let's have one last word before we go. What should Americans do? What should we as Christians do here?
I hope you can understand the need for America to turn back to God. And the only way America is going to turn back to God is by Christians praying.
Amen.
We need to pray
That's
more than
right.
we've ever prayed before for our country.
That's right. And that's it for this time. We hope you'll join us again on the next podcast for Christians United, for God and Country, and the United States Prayer Force. God bless.